Hello, we're back, and hopefully not completely broken. Let me just turn on my headphones. It's looking better, so I don't know what was causing the problem. Oh well. Wait for a couple of you guys to hop back on here. See what happens. I don't know why I did that. I restarted everything. Reset everything like I usually do. Just one of those things, I suppose. Give you guys a sec to trickle back in. Let me post a new link on Instagram real quick. Come on. I hate Instagram sometimes. Paste this. Paste. New stream link. Okay. Yeah, I got it on Twitter, so pop out the chat. It's just frustrating because like the stream's working perfectly fine now. Like it shouldn't have crashed for any reason, but it did. So here we are. We got 2 more people back in here. We gotta get the other 10 or so that were in here. But anyway. So this is what someone sort of compositionally made to invoke tension. There you can see this is sort of a tightrope walk on top of things. So this is an interesting design that creates depth, creates tension, because you don't know where you want to go. Now, for me, there's not a lot of balance with this. Balance that I made because things are spaced out. So I'm going to space these out a little bit more. Now there's more balance that the shapes have. The spacing between the shapes is more balanced. So it's a little bit better. It looks nicer. So let's see here. I also lost my notes because I had them on here. We talk about balance. We talk about hierarchy. We talked about a lot of that stuff. Let's use that and let's talk about some of the, let me pull up my Instagram again. And you can do this and find other designs that people have made, you know, and create balance. Yeah, Chris, the YouTube link should be back up. And it should be this, right? You're confusing me. I'm officially confused. And now I'm looking at myself on the link. Okay, we got the link. We're good. Okay, so let's just go through some of my designs and I can talk about some design theory behind it. So this design, Obi Toppin, whatnot. So there's color contrast and light contrast. Dark in the background, you're obviously going to look here first, and that's because this is the brightest area. This is where your eye goes. This is more of a just sort of photo manipulation, which I've said before. So we've got this going on here. Background, we have some text that is blending in, but it contrasts via color with the background so you can read it. And then there's size contrast between this tiny bing and then bong as well. And then everything has a vignette in it to bring everything back into it. Balance, if we want to talk about balance, it's more of the balance of the size of Obi is similar to the bong in the background for Bing Bong. But you can see the balance of spacing that I have on the sides here. And then we do have some color contrasts. Oops, I just double clicked. I've tried to zoom in on this and then just ended up liking it. Let's unlike that. So we've got color contrast for the shadows, or blue, which is the opposite of orange, which you can think about with color theory, using opposite colors that are going to contrast the best. you know, dark colors, light colors, and then anything that's an opposite, cold colors, warm colors are going to contrast well as well. Let me scroll down and let's just like go into the archives of like old stuff. So here's a bunch of different graphics I've made, but for NBC Sports. But you can see we've got a hierarchy, big guy, littler guys. But you can see there's sort of balance between spacing between them and how much size each of them takes up. These are all pretty much the same size. Then we have one focal point. And then we have size contrast with the text. Two small ones and a big one. So you see this one. But you look at this one first because it has a yellow background that contrasts instead of this dark black background. So we've got size contrast here. This is smaller, but you focus on it because the color contrast outweighs the color the color contrast outweighs the color contrast of yellow. I mean size contrast. So these are all pretty much, you know, the same. This one 3. We've got a little triangle hierarchy going here as well. This one big, small, aligned in the middle. The ball is also aligned in the middle. We have these frames shaping the composition to focus back in. So we're leading back in here. And then color contrast, of course, we've got this big bright reflection or light source, and then the light source in the eyes you're seeing with color contrast. It doesn't have a lot of pattern, but it does have alignment, color contrast, hierarchy. Hierarchy, big guy. And then basically top of the hierarchy, bottom here. A lot of complicated stuff down here, things that are close together. We're going to assume and think are one thing. So we've got big guy up here, little guy down here, but then we have big text, color contrast between the text, you know, color or just size contrast between the type of font, and then smaller text here, big text, smaller text, and then a signature over here that you can take a little look at as well. Then we have color contrast between the top here, which is white, and then the color going on down here. What I see a lot of younger designers do with text is, one, they don't put any on it at all, or they don't implement any sort of contrast. They just write their name out. And that's something, you know, I didn't do when I was younger. Like, it took me forever to embrace using all caps. Like, I used to make ads for car dealerships, and I remember, like, why don't I just make this all caps? Because it's a headline, instead of just having it be spelled out in camel case, or just normal case, I should say. So that's something that I would suggest doing. Now, this has a lot of text on it. This is something I made for SD Digital for Rock Nation Sports. I think there's 2 things in here. Oh, these are the 2 things I made. Sorry. So with this, you know, we have 75 is the big thing you want to see. We've got this sort of headline area, but you want to see 75. The contrast is different. There's size contrast is different. Color contrast is different than these. But these are grouped together, but spaced out well enough that these are all one thing. There's a little bit more spacing here, so you can see, okay, but these are all still one thing, spaced out further from these, which you can see are lined up. They're all lined up here on the left. So we've got alignment there, so these go all go together. We've got these here, where the numbers are all lined up on the right, so those all go together, and they're all red. But then we have a bigger area down here. And then we have different fonts to use as well. You can do that with styles of fonts. You know, these are all thick sans serif fonts. If we paired this with a really light sans serif or script font, you would have a lot of contrast with those. So you can use that to add contrast to design to figure out where you want someone to look, or to or to differentiate it. Here's another one. So we've got this triangle, or this V. You know, we got a triangle going on here. Big, little, littlest. You know, just little accent for balance. You know, this is actually upsetting some of the balance. But since this carries so much weight, having more things over here balances out the composition, like the Walter Payton Man of the Year patch and this little trophy really I knew I wanted to add this trophy in there, and it just looked better here than on this side, especially since these guys are facing that way. It'd be weird if they were facing away from it. If they're facing towards it, your eye's going to be more likely to look at it. And then we have, you know, for me, I always have a lot of spacing along the edges unless I purposefully want something to go off the edge. And that's just how I like things to look. It's just my preferred style. So you can see everything has equal spacing, balanced spacing on the edges. Let me find something that goes off the edge on purpose. Like this. Just sort of the stadium and this line goes off the edge on purpose. His hand goes off the edge on purpose. And that's sort of a composition thing based on how things were spaced out with this graphic. I have this huge photo with I'm back, which is huge, which you're going to read first, and then you can read after that what else is going on in the design. But then there's pretty equal spacing between here and the edge. But I have his hand easily off the edge. You know, if my camera's here and I have, you know, if you look at my hand, if it's right here and just my knuckle goes off of it, like that's weird. You want to have the whole thing off of it because then it doesn't create tension. I'm always avoiding creating tension in the designs unless that's the intent, and you basically a lot of what you want to do should have intent behind it. And that's a big thing that if you go to any critique as a young designer, someone will ask you, why did you do this in a design? Have an answer. You should be able to talk about your work in detail of why you did what you did. Why did you make it this color? Why did you put it over here? Why did you do that? Well, I don't know. That's not a good answer. A good answer is, oh, I didn't want to create tension having his hand on the border, so I put it off the edge so it didn't look weird. You know, I wanted I'm back to be the statement. That's why I made it huge. And I put a guy on the right and the left to balance everything out. Stuff like that. And that's advice anyone will give you when you're a younger designer. So let's shift gears a little bit. If you guys have any questions or anything, let me know. And I will touch base on some stuff that you might have missed. Or if you think I'm missing something you want me to talk about it, let me know. But I wanted to talk about typography a little bit. I've talked about this before, but every time I do these, people want to know more about typography. So one thing I haven't done is basically talked about these panels. So when this is in Photoshop, but this will work in pretty much any of the Adobe apps. Most of this theory, it's all sort of type theory to use. So we've got a character panel and a paragraph panel. So if you want to get better at typography, here's some things you can do. One thing right off the bat, which is what a lot of type teachers will say, is don't center align anything. Don't center align anything at all. I'll do it with don't do it with paragraphs of text. If you have a paragraph of text, align it to the left or align it to the right, because people will read it easier that way. If you're just doing like a name or a phrase or a one-line sentence, you can center it, that's fine. But if you have anything that hits like 2 or 3 lines, don't center it. That's just like just a designer mantra, essentially. What's up, Tyler? So if we want to create, when I'm talking about text, and let's go and look at things, I'm always talking about proper techniques for typography and then adding contrast. So, you know, oh, this is the breakdown. I don't want the breakdown. So like this text, it's aligned to the left, and I rotated it to create tension so you look at it. It's another way you can, it's different. You know, it upsets the pattern. The whole thing's tilted like that though. But you look at it. So with this text, I have size contrast here, but it has a little gradient that adds a little bit more contrast to make it different than the base text. This is even bigger, and then I have on here go away, completely different, to basically emphasize hard work. Stop working hard, go away. So creating contrast in the text you're using. So like, if I want to create contrast, I can do it really easily by making something capitalized and something not capitalized. You know, there's contrast in that. There's contrast in having something italicized and having something not italicized. Just these little things do a lot. And a lot of this stuff is super basic. But if you haven't gone to school for design, you're not going to find a video, or you're not going to search for a video to learn typography because it's not a sexy Photoshop tutorial. You know, so you can create contrast in all these things based on how bold something is. You know, different font. I'm using Myriad Pro right now, you know. If I go to Dharma Gothic, you know, I can make this large and completely illegible because I'm using this here, which is gonna, it's a fake bold. Never do this fake bold, just use a bolder font. So like if I have a lorem ipsum there and then I have a regular lorem ipsum, we're creating contrast with this. Now to create further contrast, I might take this and make it smaller and then overlap them just because it looks nice, you know, but this would need to be like a different color. So, you know, I'm going to make it red so you can actually read it. So there's color contrast and size contrast so you can read it. Now red is actually terrible on black, so don't do red on black. But I don't really have a good font because it's like, it's still really hard to read, but that's besides the point. Because I also have this fake italic on it. Don't do the fake italics either. Use an actual italic font because that's what was made. It was intended to be used in that way. So like this is something I would use for like a first name, last name, or for like a title. We've got big, bold, smaller, littler. Now one thing I want, I don't know what everybody knows with typography. One thing that I try to show is, let me just break down what we have here. So, quick breakdown of what we're looking at in the character panel and the paragraph panel. The paragraph panel I'll start with because this is mainly where you can align text, which is pretty simple. But this is where you can add spacing after paragraphs, which is what I use a lot more often. Because let's say we have big old paragraph. Oh, come on. Should really just get that some lorem ipsum on here. There we go. Like we have this paragraph, and I guess I have to go back here to explain what these things are. So we got our size. We'll go back. We've got size. Clearly, this is something you know how to use. Then we have the... I'm gonna delete everything on here because it's just messing me up. Now I always draw a box when I do type. And the reason is because I can easily align it and move it around where I want. Because if you were to just type this out, you know, if I want to align a bunch of these up and I can just change the alignment if I have a box because the box is all aligned. But if I do this, you see it moves all around the space, where if I do it here, it's all within this box. It's contained a little bit better. That's just a personal preference. Okay, so we have size. You clearly know size. We've got here the leading, which is the space in between the lines. So I can copy this, make a new line, make a new line, make a new line. Now these are all too close to each other, so that's when we can go into the paragraph. And this guy here allows us to add leading in between paragraphs. That's how you can space things out a little bit better. Now a lot of what we're probably going to be using is not a lot of paragraphs. Yeah, I want to delete this text. Thank you. Here's some spots that I think younger designers can improve on. Let me just spread this out. Don't care what it says. So you can see it's moving around a bunch. So we've got here, we have the kerning and the tracking. So kerning is the space in between letters. And this is something that I bring up a lot in my, what are they called? Design Discord critiques. Is that you'll have something just based on the default font. Can I set this to 0? And most fonts are fine, with the tracking and kerning, but you always want to kern and track things yourself. I always usually go to optical because it optically tracks things together. But basically, the tracking you can change in between individuals. For kerning, I always get these mixed up. So the kerning is the space in between letters, in between just individual letters. So if you type something out and it looks weird, you can go in here and you can tighten it back up. Now I made it huge, but you can see if we just type out, let me type out, LeBron James. And I'll use like Dharma Gothic. Let's just do Dharma Gothic. So for me, whenever I use a thicker font like this Dharma font, I usually adjust the tracking to make it so you can read it better. So usually track it out just a little bit. It might be, 10, 20, 25. Because that just reads a little bit easier than this. Now, depending on what size it is, it might be fine. But if I make this super small, it might be harder to read. So you can boost the tracking out. But you can also boost the tracking out on purpose, which is what I do a lot. Because that creates a lot of contrast. But then you can read things a little bit easier. And that definitely comes in handy when you have like really thin fonts. Like if I go like this and just kind of come back like this, you can kind of read this. But if we boost this out, it gives it a little bit more dimension. It takes up more space, its size is bigger. I think it just reads a little bit cleaner depending on what you're doing. So if you're a newer designer, make sure you're looking at the kerning and tracking. The kerning probably will be fine if you do optical, if you're using a good font. But if you use a font you pulled off of like DaFont, or it's a really custom font, I'm just scrolling down. Most of the fonts I get are from this is a good example, are from Adobe. But so I have the tracking here set at 20. I'm going to set that back down to 0. Now, to me, I think there's too much spacing between the B and the R. That's just a personal preference. So I'm just going to tighten it up just a little bit. So we went from this space, It moved it over almost nothing, but I think it flows better. A lot of the times what you're going to have issues with is you're going to have it with V's. If I have a V and an A, these, since this is a good typeface, tightens things up automatically. If I set this to 0, look at this giant line. Like if I type in the word just like, vampire, who cares? Vampire. And this is with no tracking. It's just set to default. Like there's this huge space. And if we want to talk about balance, like we talked about before, the balance in the spacing between the letters is off right here. And someone is going to be able to see this. So that's why if you set it to optical, it shoves it over. And you can do it with metrics as well, which moves it over even more. So you can play around with either metrics or optical, see which one you think looks best. But make sure you're using this. Because I see a lot of young designers don't do that. And I have a button now I hit where it looks like you can drive a truck through that. And it's Voodoo doing his little Purdue horn. So I use that now in case I think something needs to be tracked or kerned better. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of issues on your hand. Or you're going to have a glaring thing that an experienced designer is going to see, and they're going to be like, this person doesn't know how to do type well. And that's going to separate yourself from someone else who might want a job. I don't know, possibly. So let's show other ways of creating contrast in type. So I'm gonna make this smaller. So that's good. But usually when I make something smaller, I might want to balance it out. So if this was a title, I might balance this out like this to separate it. I personally think big, huge tracking between the whole word looks great. So that's why I like to do it a lot in my designs. So we've got, vampire. We can create more contrast if we take this and make it, a different font. So we talked about fonts that, I don't know why this is stretched out. I don't want this to be all caps because it looks terrible. You can have contrast in the just name. So, you know, I could put vampire in front of this. You know, let's take this top vampire and just make it blue and just blow it up and let's put it beneath it. Like, that's cool. It's creating, I'm using it more as a shape right now than anything else, but we've got the same text and you can read it. It's just adding some contrast, it's adding some color. It looks kind of nice. You can still read vampire in the front. You can kind of read it in the back, but I'm not really concerned if you can read it in the back. And then I really want this to have more contrast. So I would make it, I would really make these top ones 2 different fonts, because this font only has a regular, you know, there's nothing else to it. So maybe I make this Gotham black. And then well, sorry, now I'm gonna make this Gotham black. No, stop, do that. Yeah. My hotkeys are betraying me. Gotham. Ultra. For some reason, no, that one's fine. Okay. And then we can make this like Gotham book. So we've got our size contrast. We've got size contrast, we've got thickness contrast, we've got color contrast, all creating just like a little name. And you can do this with anything. Maybe you have this with a little bit of like an outline to it. You know, you can set the fill to 0 and then give it a stroke. I would probably convert it to an object first, but let's see, you know, stroke, and then we can do color. We just make it black again. Make it like 2 pixels. So that's outline. Oh, I don't want this bevel on there. You know, that's a way you can do it. So if we get rid of this back guy here, you know, we've got size contrast here where vampire is a lot bigger than this smaller one, but they take up about the same space optically because this is dark and full lined and this is not. You know, if we make this ultra, you know, your eye goes to this before it goes to this, just based on the contrast that this demands over this. Real quick, someone asked, Technique wants to know my new document settings. My new document settings are just this. There's nothing special. I use 2000 by 2500. That's a 4:5 ratio. I just design it 300 pixels per inch. And then I export, I save for web. It's actually the legacy version. I just save for web at 100% quality, and then I airdrop it to my phone, or just post it on Instagram from my computer. Hey hater, the stream broke, but we're doing better now. Noah, how do you fit a longer quote in the box without overlapping text going outside of your box, or even maybe decreasing font size? So one thing I see, and I've talked about in my Discord, when it comes to like, here's a box. If I want to put text in this box, boom, here's my text, great. We have Gotham. Let's set this back down to 0. I don't know why some of these settings happen that are on 100. I'm gonna make this smaller. So we have this paragraph of text that looks like this. It probably would be a little smaller. There, here's a regular paragraph of text. Now I space this out how I think it looks nice optically with the spacing. A good rule of thumb is whatever your font size is plus at least 2. When I was in college, I did 10:13 all the time. I just set type 10:13. It looked great. It just looks nice. Now we're in a different document. That would be for like an 8:10 or an 8.5:11. But here, okay. So we have text in this box. Now what I see a lot of younger designers do is they'll just put the text in the box like this. I'm trying to think of your exact question, Noah, and how you would do it. But if I wanted to fill a longer quote in this box without overlapping text, I would just decrease the font size so you don't go outside the box. But what I would do here is I would give this a lot of padding to make it so you can actually read it well. You know, it's balanced on the inside. A lot of this stuff you can do in InDesign automatically, which is why InDesign is good for typesetting. Photoshop, not too much, but we're going to use Photoshop for cool things anyway. And everybody uses it, so that's what I'm going to show you what to do. So this looks nice, typed, aligned there. So if we compare it to something where I just basically have the text box the exact same size, where I just squeeze it in there. You know, this has a lot more balance and spacing in it than this one, and it looks a little bit better. Especially if I make this like centered. You know, which one looks better? This one looks better. It's cleaner. Things are spaced out a little bit better than usual. You know, there's nothing wrong with having spacing, especially when it comes to type, because you want them to be able to read it well. I mean, when you open up a book, what do you see? You see a big, huge border around the edges. You know, and there's a whole calculation to figure that out that you can use to start from. But I mean, if you open up a book, I'm just gonna do this real quick. Book. If you open up a book and you're reading it, your text is probably only going to be like here and here. You know, they need spacing for the center, for the fold in the center, and then the edges as well. It's probably going to have a lot of spacing. So like, space things out. Okay, what would I do if your spacing makes it where a line ends with a comma or a word not finished the way you want? Depending on what you can do, change a word or make it smaller still. One thing you don't want to do is have an orphan or a widow. So I'm just going to type in some... Where did I type in that gibberish? So like if you have a paragraph that looks like this, what is happening? What is going on? Oh, I hit enter and it still has my paragraph settings of 12.5 points afterwards. So if you have something like this, avoid this at all costs. Let's say this is a two paragraphs too. So one's a widow, one's an orphan. I don't remember which is called. But you don't want one word on one line, and you don't want one word to start something off. So like this is bad. Like this is all sorts of bad right here. Like if you're reading this and you're at the end of a sentence and it goes to another page, that's bad. If you have one item at the bottom down here, you want to get rid of that. You want to resize things so it all fits on that line. Does that make sense, Noah? Technically, we might cover your question in a different Q&A because I really wanted to talk about a very specific agenda for this, but I do have some that are just, I might just make that a completely different video if you wanted to message me about it. Let's talk more about type. Okay, so here are these settings. You see these settings here? Right here, that's a basically make taller and make wider. Never use these. I don't know why these exist. Actually, I think they exist for fonts that are variable, which is fine. But like a no-no to do. This is one of the no-nos I was going to talk about. But like never take your font and stretch it just like you have a box to like fill it in. You know, just use the font itself or use a different type of the font to have it filled in. So let's say we have this rectangle. You know, here's this rectangle we used. Let me go back a little bit. Okay. Rectangle. So let's say we want vampire. And usually if I make a box around something like this, I try to make it so it has nice even edges to it. You know, if it looks like this, like why is there all this extra space over here? There's tension over here. Let's say we have this box and I want to fill vampire in this box. And I can put it in the center. Now what I've seen, what younger designers will do is they'll just draw with a box and they'll just make it fit like that, which is something you'd never want to do. If you wanted to do that, you would find a different font or adjust it some other way. So I would use instead Gotham Condensed. Gotham, I don't have Gotham Condensed on here. Okay. You know, use a different font to make that work. So maybe we do light, we tighten it up a bit, we make it a little bit bigger, bring up the tightness a little bit. Basically, if you want your font to be skinnier, use a different font. If you want it to be taller, but it's a fat font, use a different font. Best fonts, Hater Productions. I don't know if there are best fonts. I use Dharma Gothic a lot. I like fonts that have a lot of different alternate fonts to it. Thicknesses, italics, stuff like that. So I can use one font to create a graphic and have different sizes and contrasts to create with. And that's something that you want to make sure you do as well if you're younger designers. Don't use too many fonts. You know, unless it's like crazy intentional. Don't use too many fonts, because if you have a headline that is blue, you know, like this, then we have a paragraph. I want to fill this. Can I fill this with lorem ipsum text? No. Maybe. Lorem ipsum. Delete. 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 Tungsten's good. It's there's a lot of the same fonts in sports, because a lot of the fonts are sort of similar and they sort of evoke that. So let's do something bad. Let's make this, I don't know, absolute. Like, you see how terrible this looks? It's because of our tracking or our kerning. I would use 3 max, Quentin. Yes, I completely agree. So actually, I would probably make the headline this font. Never do capitalized script fonts. They look terrible. See how bad that looks? I mean, it looks bad because of the spacing, but this looks bad. It's not readable. So I want a headline. That looks much better. So we'll make this Gotham. You know, maybe book. Maybe we make it a little bit smaller. Just because. So you got a headline there. But then if I take like another font for like the person's name or something like that, Jeremy Fisher. So you've got, you know, Jeremy Fisher. Maybe that's a, here you go, you know, Garamond. It's a different font. You know, it just kind of looks odd. Now this font doesn't bode well for this, and I'm sort of spacing things out. So like there's one way of typesetting something, but then we can also just go here and go to Gotham. I'm going to set it to bold, and then if I just change this to be medium and change this to be, I don't know, black, or we change this to be ultra, and then we change this to be light italic, you know. So this top one looks more immature, more amateur, because we're using so many different fonts, whereas this looks more polished. We're only using one font, but we're using different variations of that font. If I'm doing anything 3D text-wise, I use Cinema 4D, but a lot of these same theories come in place, but that's what I use for 3D instead of Photoshop. They're actually getting rid of the 3D aspect in Photoshop, so that's also why I don't do it in here. I know some people use After Effects or Blender as well. Okay. That's really what I wanted to talk about with fonts. And I talked a lot about fonts. We touched a lot about design theory with balance, hierarchy, pattern or repetition, and contrast. Those are the main things I want you to take away from this. And you can go back and look at the broken video, look at part of that, and the second half that popped up on here. Let's see. Let's talk about some stuff that you should never do. These are things that I just think, never do this as a designer. A lot of designers will agree with you. Main one, as I said, never stretch text manually, because it looks stupid and it looks bad. That's something never to do. Don't use too many fonts, like we said. That's another one. I had a bunch. You know, if you're going to put something towards the edge, like put it off the edge completely. or keep it on inbounds. Yeah, I'll stitch them together somehow, Chris, and figure that out. I had a good list of things you should never do. Okay, so I asked some people on Twitter for things that they think amateurs do that you should get rid of. So let's get rid of everything. And we're going to do it with this text here, but like a lot of the stuff that you can do in Photoshop by default is going to look bad. So like I can add a drop shadow to this and at 100% at, I don't know what the defaults are. Let's say 10 and 10. There might be 100. I don't know what it is. But like this looks terrible. You know, if I use this in a design, I would never do this. I would always take that drop shadow. For this, if I was actually doing this, I would probably make this 25. You know, it could be as easy as that. It's just making it not as intense. If we look at, let's find some designs. I use drop shadows all the time. But like this Aaron Rodgers design, I've got this drop shadow here. And one technique you can use, which might work out well, is let's say we have this headline here. We've got our default drop shadow, which looks terrible. I can set it to 25, which makes it look better. I probably wouldn't need one here because there's color contrast that's good enough. I did it here because I wanted to make it seem like it actually had a shadow. So that was intentional is why I did that. But what I would do, give it a drop shadow. I'm going to make it like 50%. But I'm going to take and select that color and then just use a dark color of whatever the background is. And then we'll do that. So then if I have these side by side, let's see what the differences are. You know, you can see this one is much darker than this one. This one blends in more because we're using a color from the background to make it contrast. Same thing with like bevel and emboss. If you're going to use the bevel and emboss, try to know what you're doing. You know, I don't know what these settings are right now. They're on something real weird. Let's say we want to do an inner bevel that's smooth, that is the size of that. Normal is white. I think the normal is black. I don't know what these default settings are. Because apparently the default settings are wacky with whatever I did on here. I want it to be up. That's why everything looks weird. It's like a default setting of a bevel emboss. Like this looks terrible. Or it doesn't look terrible. Sorry. It looks amateur. So I tend to avoid, like I avoid pretty much everything in this filter gallery. Sure, convert this to a smart object. Who cares? I pretty much ignore most of this. You know, when I was in like 7th grade, I would play around with these with like photos of me in T-ball and just, you know, click and see what the plastic wrap does or what this looks like or what this looks like. Most of these are going to look terrible by themselves. I'm not saying you can't use these. Like I'll use the film grain. Some of these are good by themselves. Like film grain's pretty decent by itself. There's another one in here that's decent by itself. But if I'm going to use these, I'm probably going to change a blending mode of that layer to be something else so that effect isn't so harsh. Probably going to set it to soft light so it just changes the contrast of what I'm looking at and not make it so black and white. What else? Oh, things, just nitpicky things that Brad doesn't like. That's what we're talking about here today. Nitpicky things. Let me just pull up something I made. Let me just pull up this Obi-Top and Bing Bong graphic. When you're doing clipping masks, make sure you go in and fix the edges of your clip. So you can see here there's nothing going on. You know, there might be a fringe. Make sure you get the fringe around your entire graphic. Now I think I have some somewhere. Actually, it's in the other graphic where I didn't do this as well as I should have. Where's this graphic at? So I just like organized a whole bunch of my stuff. Yeah, Jared, exactly. So nitpicky things Brad doesn't like. So we're gonna pull up Aaron Rodgers because he hates his siblings. Okay, so like down here, you see the darkness right here on his foot? Like I would want to clip that out. And I meant to do it. And I think I did it in a couple other spots where I was like, you know what? I could have clipped that better and didn't. Like there's some up here. You can see on his arm, it's highlighted here, but then there's this dark area. Like, clip that out. But I didn't do it here because this is just for me. It doesn't matter. But another thing I see people do, and I'm just going to steal this outline of Obi Toppin. Nope, don't want that. I want a real composition. Obi Toppin. Okay. God, that looks good. Just really good photo. So what I see some people do is they'll give a like outer glow. Come on. You gonna do this for me? They'll like give an outer glow to a player that's sort of mocking light, that there's light behind them. And like this doesn't look nice. You know, it looks really default and amateur if I just give him an outer glow that's, you'd be like, oh, he's glowing, he's emitting light or something like that. There's different ways of doing that. But it just goes back to just using default things. You know, I hate seeing that. And if I see that, I immediately go, this guy or girl is an amateur. They're making amateur mistakes, which is fine because we're all at different levels. Some of us are crawling in the design world. Some of us are walking. Some are running. Some are flying. Some are making NFTs. So there's a whole bunch of different stages of design that you're at. Okay, let's talk about something else someone wanted to know. I'll use this as an example. So that's good. I don't know. Some are tripping. This is true. Some people don't like anyone in their family and they abandon them and don't talk to them ever again. Night City Blue. So I'm just finding a random photo because someone wanted to know how I blend something into a background. And I've done it on stream before, but I'm going to show you guys again, just real quick, the technique that I would do that. So like here's two things. We have this photo of Obi Toppin. You're new to design, you love sports edit and jersey swaps. What are your tips? I did a bunch of design tips at the beginning, and a lot of it comes down to just general design theory and creating a hierarchy. Those are the main things. Creating a hierarchy of where you want someone to look and using contrast to do so. So like, let's do some color blending. Someone asked for that, so we're going to do that. So we've got this nighttime photo of Tokyo, apparently, and Obi Toppin on top. So there's a couple things we need to do to blend this in. One, Obi's way too bright. If this was nighttime, he would be much darker. Two, he's way too warm. You know, the background is really cold and blue. So we need to fix both of those. So first thing I would do is give this an exposure of like, I don't know, -1.5. It's just a good place to start. That looks a little bit better. Maybe we do -2. Maybe not so much. -1.5. So that's good. Then I will go to color balance and adjust the midtones by adding cyan and blue, because there's cyan and blue to that. And we can do it for the shadows too. And you want to make sure that this is clipped to what you're looking at. And then same with the highlights. Now the highlights, maybe we keep red just because these lights are emitting mostly orange, but there are some blue ones as well. But you can see already he's blended in pretty well. And we didn't do anything. We just did two things. Now there's one new thing you can do. Let's take a look and try it. There's a neural filter, which is called harmonization. So I can turn on harmonization and download this 200 megabyte file. So we're going to do that. Yes, Noah has a good point. If you want to look at jersey swaps, personally, I hate jersey swaps. I have a jersey swap video on how I jersey swapped Obi Toppin, David Montgomery, and then me and Henry swapped Lonzo Ball on a stream. Take a look at that if you want to learn a little bit about jersey swapping, or how I like to. So harmonization, what it does You can just read it here. Harmonize the color and luminosity of one layer to another to make a flawless composite. So really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this background, not do anything, and it's automatically going to change it. Now I think he's like really red for some reason. So you can see, so I might add in some cyan, and adding in cyan is going to dumb down the oranges and warm parts. So I don't even like how that looks, so we're not going to do that. So if you want to blend something in, match the luminosity. So I need to make it darker. So I used exposure to make it darker. Then I use the color balance to add in blue to balance it more towards cold. I then would take then you want to emulate the light. So I might take a curves adjustment layer, boost it up. I'm going to make it so it doesn't affect the darks. It just affects the lights. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of blue because the light is predominantly blue. And I'm going to get rid of some red. I'm just going to make it blue. So I'll invert that actually, and then go in and figure out where the light parts are. And I'm going to do this real roughly just because we're just kind of showing you just a little bit. You know, I would spend 10-20 minutes doing the lighting, fixing the lighting on here. But if you just want to quickly blend something in, you can use these effects here. But I'm just going to draw back in the highlights, and you can draw in the shadows as well. But already right away, this looks like it's a lot better than it was. You know, this was the before, this is the after. So just using exposure, a color balance, and a curves. I'm going to try and think of some more things that I want to tell you about, things I don't like people to do. But if you guys have any questions of something that I can show you quickly in Photoshop or to talk about, let me know right now. And we can do that. And until then, we're going to look at some stuff on just here to show you and touch back on some of the things that I talked about earlier. So like hierarchy, big Aaron Rodgers, little Aaron Rodgers. We got balance of two items beneath him, but we're all centered here. Since he's so big on this side, we balance it out with text on this side, sort of thing. Yeah, Noah. Right, just basically absorbers, be a sponge and try new things. You want to talk about backgrounds. What is too much? What is too little? It depends on what you want to focus your attention to. With contrast, if you have a busy background, you want to have a simple foreground. If you have a busy foreground, you want a simple background. Steph Curry just beat Ray Allen's record. That was bound to happen. Here we go. We got Steph Curry right here. How about that? So like this background is kind of complicated, but has overall low contrast to the foreground. But the foreground's really simple. We just have one Steph Curry, two Steph Curry, background. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on there. There does come a time, there's no perfect background. I've always wondered how people do the all black background and show a player looking there like on the court and reflects in the black. It's probably just flipping a player over and just using a couple color contrast thing. That'd probably have to be a different video. Let's take a look at some of these backgrounds though, since you brought it up. Like this, simple foreground, just two photos of LeBron and a blurred signature. The background, super complicated. Lots of colors, lots of contrast, stuff like that. This one, simple background. It's just a stadium. And then we have a foreground of these objects. This Russell Westbrook, complicated background. Patterns and textures and colors and gradients and this thing in the front, but the focus is just on this big image. Simple foreground with contrast. Let's see here. This, pretty simple background. You know, it's just sort of this text. Just a sky as the background. Simple foreground. Spell his name wrong? No? No? What did I say? Did I not say Russell Wilson? Whatever. What did I say? Did I not call him Russell Wilson? It's like this Alvarez, super detailed, complex background. I said his name wrong, whatever. With his text, simple foreground. Oh, I said Westbrook. Okay, well, I think I have a Russell Westbrook design here somewhere. It's like this background. Ask me whatever you want. Yeah, ask me whatever you want. We can do that for like the next 15 minutes. It's like this background. Usually when I have a background, I just like to have it either be a scene or color with texture applied to it. So this is a color gradient with some texture applied to it in the form of a topographic map that is reversed. And then I have stuff contrasting on top with a simple foreground. Bobon FPS, make 3D text a metallic one. I have a completely different tutorial on how to make 3D text, specifically metallic if you want to take a look at it. It's like 15-20 minutes long. It shows you step by step how you can make metallic text using Cinema 4D Lite through After Effects. So you need After Effects in order to do it. But take a look at that. That'll show you how to do that specifically. So like here's a breakdown of this Luca graphic I made. It's got somewhat of a complicated background, but it all is low contrast in the colors. It's all pretty much just white with a little bit of darkness in it. And then I built upon that a little bit of the floor and then sort of this framing area in that contrasts with the background. But then we just have him in the foreground. And I wanted a simple background so you could read this text here. And then so the focus can be on this photo of Luca here. All right, KG makes you quit. It's saying, how important is a degree in getting a job in this area? Graduated with an associate's in IT, obviously not design, but want to pursue this and I'm self-taught and learn from people like yourself. Yeah, Kevo, people don't realize that Cinema 4D has a light version. It works pretty well for what you would really need to use it for. Okay, so like getting a degree, I talked about this with Calsoscoped on our designer duel that we did because he is in college and I went to college. And essentially it's going to boil down to whomever is going to hire you. In my opinion, if you don't have a degree, you have to be one of the top 5% of sports designers in the nation in our field. You have to be one of the best of the best. And there are a couple people who have done that successfully. Jay Clay has done that. Dan Goldfarb has done that. Dan is now doing freelance, and Jay is working, I think, for Turner doing NBA stuff. Neither of them have design degrees. They started designing straight out of high school. There's only a handful of people that I think in my mind that can do that. And they're just gifted, great artists. But like as I explained some stuff I taught earlier or mentioned earlier with typography, that's something you'll learn in college. That's something a lot of younger designers struggle with. Most jobs you'll find will say you need a bachelor's degree in general. It might not say graphic design, but they want you to have a bachelor's degree. And a lot of that is just old-fashioned, this is how things are done. You need a college degree to work here. And some of that is going away, but it's the old guard. It's change is slow. It's a weird thing in the world. I'm gonna say in America, where in like the 50s, it was a huge deal to have a high school diploma. And you know, in the 90s and 2000s, it was a college degree was the equivalent of having a high school diploma, because back then all you needed was a high school diploma. Now you need to have a college degree. Well, with COVID hitting and people realizing that they can outsource a lot of their work, you know, they might find someone who doesn't live in the same city as them that they can use. They're finding talent with people on the internet, since we live in such a subjective sports realm. You know, our work is very subjective. If something looks good and something doesn't look good. Now, the theories I said before and stated before really play into this of knowing what looks good and what doesn't look good. So your portfolio is going to do a lot of talking, but if they have a requirement on there that you'd need a bachelor's degree. The only way you're going to get around that is if someone's willing to take a chance on you. And the creative manager or director might do that, but their boss or people who are in charge actually might not let that. So you can probably freelance for sure without a high school diploma, because they don't care. They just want quality work. If you're working at a corporation, they're probably going to want you to have a degree. If you go work for a team, they're probably going to want you to have a degree. I know teenagers now that are doing sports design work in high school because they're excellent artists. They're excellent designers. They have a style that people want and techniques people want emulated for their brands. So they've done work with people. Like Enrique Productions has done some stuff. Thatcher Mack is someone I always go back to who's in high school, who's done a lot of work. Crazy portfolio for a teenager, you know. And they're just, one, I think, gifted artists, and two, they put in the time to get better as designers, post on social media, and they've got top tier work. So I think you need to get a degree. Need is a bad word. I would recommend getting a degree because that's the path I took. Now everyone's different. So it really depends on what you're able to do. You know, financially, what you're able to do. If you're not able to do it financially, hop on YouTube and grind as if you were in school. You know, use that. Several hours a day learning, which I don't think a lot of people are going to do. But there are some people who are doing it, who are putting in college level time commitments to get better. I don't feel the UK values creative arts. A lot of people don't value creative arts, Chris, but that's slowly changing. There's also a bunch of free courses online, Chris said. I do a ton of videos just on sports design. If you want only sports design, I show you a whole bunch of stuff. Noah says he's trying to get into the field with an associate's at least and keep grinding out a portfolio. See, I had an associate's degree and continued on to get a bachelor's degree. And I did that because I knew I had the technical skill of using Photoshop and all of the programs to make things. But I didn't have the creativity there or the design theory behind it to make things look as well as they should. If I showed you the stuff I made in college, it's terrible. So also don't get down on that, like seeing something I make. You know, I'm 32. If you're in high school, there's no reason you think you should make something like this. I've been using Photoshop for 20 years. You know, but I've only started getting excellent in the sports design realm in the last 4 years because I did a 365 project, really grinded down, learned new techniques in Photoshop, paired with the knowledge I learned while I went to college. Also post on social media. Like Kevo says, like, it's free. It's free to post there. Post on Twitter, post on Instagram. Now, the issue sort of nowadays is there's a lot more saturation than 3 years ago for sports design. More and more people are trying to pick it up and wanting to do it and stuff like that. So that is something to be aware of as well. You gotta, it's like making the NBA. Some people can do it right out of college, but only, Kobe, Garnett, and some guy named LeBron. Did I say him? No. But most other people grind out, go to a college to learn or get better at basketball, and then they put in the reps daily and daily and daily to get better, to get to the NBA, to keep getting playing time or keep getting jobs. Okay. Yeah, see, Chris, I don't know if there's a lot of saturation. There's a lot of demand, though. But there's a lot of demand for good designers. So I would say, there's a lot more saturation of people who are interested in design and sports design that is good, and there's a future force in there, but a lot of people are still going to go to people that have more of a resume behind them. And Chris is saying sometimes you have to work for free. I personally wouldn't do that. Because working for free is such a privilege to people. I'll use myself as an example. I got an internship in college, but it was paid $10 an hour. So I still got paid for it. But I didn't have to take care of my family. You know, if I have a family I have to take care of, and I'm already working a job, I can't work a free internship at a college somewhere for 60 hours a week. You know, I have to make something that makes money. So if there's someone who's privileged and their family doesn't need their assistance and they can do whatever they want in their free time, they're going to be able to do it more so than someone who doesn't, which is a shame. Being a well-rounded creative is good. Being a photographer and a designer and a video production guy is good. Now, the problem with that is a lot of these jobs that are coming out are, hi, we want you to do we want you to wear 8 hats as a designer. It's like people who run social media. You know, it's just the same as them. Like they have to know Photoshop so they can tweak some of the stuff the designer makes. They need to be able to make photos. They might need to be able to edit videos. They need to be able to write copy. You know, they need to be able to direct social media days and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say as a design field, let's hop over to just the camera. As a design field, Adam Martin said, well, and someone else, I think Mark Cuban or Mr. Wonderful said, like, it's a race to the bottom for salary in this field. There are a lot of people who want in the field, so there's an oversaturation of interest. So, like, there might be a job you can get that pays $24,000 a year, requires a bachelor's degree. Terrible. Why would anyone take that job? Well, you get to work for this logo. And you get to put this logo on your resume and say, I got to work for this logo. So don't chase logos. Chase culture. Chase environment. Something like that. Value your worth. You know, like I took a job out of college that didn't pay well, but I was living at home, so I didn't care. You know, I didn't have rent or anything. Not everybody can do that. I know a lot of more experienced designers are trying to change that, you know, vying for seats at the table with, you know, athletic directors. You know, if I'm the director of social media or branding or content for a college, I want to be able to know that my knowledge of what works is being heard. And if I'm talking to an athletic director that has no knowledge of social media or anything, I'm going to be on deaf ears. You know, so having someone creatively up there aligned with an athletic director, you know, a creative director of the college, you know, something like that. Like they have creative directors at just regular businesses, you know, or vice presidents of, you know, of content or design. Like that doesn't exist in sports, and it should exist in sports. The issue is money, though. They have all this money that they can get from boosters, but it's not like they can pay salaries with that. You know, hopefully it's changing because, you know, they make all this money from ticket sales, but where does it go? You know, so it's trying to change so we get people in charge who want to help people below and know their worth below. So it's a rant about jobs in sports, but don't work for free. That's all I'm saying. If someone wants something done and they want you to do it for free, just say no, because you're better off. It's wasting your time because they don't respect you as a creative. Yep. I think that's my Twitter page. Thank you, Kevo. Okay, I think with that, we're gonna call it a day. Let's just look through a couple things real quick. So like rule of 3, we've got sort of we've got a really plain background. It's just a stadium, but then we have sort of this back middle ground flag, which contrasts with these guys here. We have this as one object, which is balanced off with this. And then we've got all of these, you know, little soccer balls down here, contrasting with the background, contrasting with him. But all in all, it's balanced. There's equal balance on the sides. You know, this ball's off the side. This ball's a little spaced off. You know, those are just kind of hanging out. But there's equal spacing around things. Connor McDavid graphic I did with Footy Graphics. You know, there's balance. Big left side. A lot of color over here, but it's contrasted by this big, huge McDavid. Big, little, size contrast, color contrast with the background. There's texture added with a bunch of other stuff as well. Here's a different Obi Toppin design. If you want advice, there's a Discord link. I think in this, there should be a Discord link here somewhere. Oh, I need to switch over. I'm showing you stuff you guys can't see. Well, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Thank you. Go to my Twitter page. I tweet about my Discord. Oh, here, let me just link my Discord in here. I'm in this Discord all the time, so if you have any questions, you can ask me questions in there. I do weekly critique videos of one piece a week for whoever wants it. So you can use that as an avenue. Let me invite someone. Let's copy. I will paste it here. Look, I do weekly videos where I critique one piece, so I'll give you advice in there all the time. So take a look at that, and I'll look at your portfolio pieces as well. Let me hop back. Not that it matters. What Kevo? Yeah, KG makes you quit. I live in Dayton, so. Quentin, you're saying we'll end on this. Quentin, you're saying you don't know how much I struggle on social media, Twitter. Making 20 likes is a challenge. Stop focusing on likes. Don't design for likes. Design for you to get better as a designer. You don't look at. I don't want to look at Shelly's new piece on Twitter. Shelly's so good. Yeah, that's real nice. Here, let's look at this real quick. Let's look at this beautiful piece that I can clearly tell Shelly made. This one? Who'd she make this for? Basketball Forever? Great. So don't focus on social media likes, because likes don't mean anything. Design for yourself to get better. That's what I did with my 365. I just posted it. I did it to get people to notice me or to follow me, to sort of grow using hashtags. But like, I don't worry about likes at all. Like, you shouldn't worry about likes, because it's just a bunch of people who don't know anything about design. If they like or even see it, you know, if they don't even see it, it's not your problem. If Instagram only shows it to 20 people and 20 people like it. So design for yourself is what I would say. Just to learn. Each time I make something, I just try and say, what can I learn from making this design? Or what technique can I try that I then can learn and put in my pocket or my utility belt, and how to use it. Yeah, also don't care about what others think, and then you'll stop enjoying it. That's 100% true as well. I'm gonna retweet this real quick. All right, guys. So that's gonna do it for me today. This was great. It broke, but it came back in, so that was fine. If you guys are interested in videos like this, like and subscribe. I've got a bunch of design breakdowns on there, bunch of tutorials. I need to do a couple tutorials, design breakdowns, I think for Kevo specifically, on a couple Obi Toppin graphics I just made. So I'll do those at some point in time. Yeah, KG, I'm glad you're back here. I'm glad you stumbled upon me. Okay, so where was I at? If you guys want to be in my ear at all times, just hop into my Discord. You know, I check that often, give people feedback on that, and I do the guaranteed feedback a week critiques. It's Tuesday to Tuesday, so I put those out usually over the weekend. But other than that, check out the rest of my other videos. I hope you guys got a lot out of this. This was fun to do. I want to do more streams like this. We're not designing, but we're just talking about design. I might do just a different question and answer. I wanted this to be really showcasing specific things that you wanted me to show you how, but we can do that some other time. But I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna go take a drink because my voice is very raspy. You guys have a lovely rest of your Tuesday night, and I'll see you guys next